Shabbat means to rest, to cease, and everything seems to quiet down, even today. Everywhere the roads are almost deserted, from Jerusalem to Tiberias, from Tel Aviv to Haifa. From early afternoon onward, the faithful pray in ever-growing numbers before the ancient stones of the Kotel, or Wailing Wall, the last remnant of the Temple of Jerusalem. In the Meir Sherim quarter, in the northwest corner of the Old City, black felt hats and severe dark clothing predominate. They waste 1/7 of their lives in idleness, wrote Tacitus about the Hebrew Sabbath. In the Bible we find the words,
"For 6 days you will do your work, and on the 7th you will rest, so that your ox and your donkey may rest, and the child of your slave girl have a breathing space, and the stranger too."
בצאת ישראל ממצרים בית יעקב מעם לועז.
The Sabbath is a distinctive characteristic of the relationship between God and the people of Israel, a day which commemorates the completion of creation. The Sabbath begins on Friday evening, immediately after sunset, and concludes on Saturday evening as soon as the first stars appear in the sky. On every table, a candle is lit, a symbol of peace. Time is dedicated to the study of the Torah because those who acquire the words of the Torah will have life in the world to come. Observance of the Sabbath is a mandatory precept, a sign of Judaic law, which is a sacred obligation, the will of God revealed to a people governed by that will.
Tiberias is located on the west bank of the lake, 212 meters below sea level. To the east lie the Golan Heights. To the north, the hills of Galilee. To the south, the Jordan Valley. At the time of Jesus, the town occupied a strategic position. For the Roman legions, it was a place to rest after the fatigue of their military campaigns. In the nearby village of Hamat, therapeutic hot springs are still frequented today. Here, excavations have brought to light a synagogue whose floor mosaics depict the 4 seasons and the zodiac. It's a further testimony as to how carefully the Hebrew religion structured its liturgical calendar, but above all, as to how it considered knowledge of the law to be a wisdom superior to any human wisdom.
This omnipresent law regulated the life of Israel. It was a tradition handed down by the fathers from the ancient land of Canaan, where, between Syria and Egypt, the Israelites settled in the second millennium before Christ. In the Syrian town of Ugarit, which lies on the Mediterranean coast, documents which appear to be legal contracts were discovered. They are an example of the Jewish law, which was based on Canaanite law.
Very short ones. And they eat it also with salads, a lot of olive oil.
One of the pillars of the synagogue of Capernaum is inscribed with a six-pointed star formed by two opposed and intersecting equilateral triangles. Not far away, a bas-relief depicts the Ark of the Covenant, which contained the tables of the law. As Yahweh my God commanded me, I have taught you laws and customs for you to observe, Moses said to Israel. The Hebrew word Torah is often translated as law. Torah means instruction, wisdom, a synthesis of all human and divine knowledge, a route to perfection. The Torah is made up of the first 5 books of the Bible: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. It contains the secrets of life revealed by God to his people. It transmits the benevolent will of a God who guides and directs his people, the sole experience by means of which the Israelites could live their covenant with him. The Torah goes well beyond the limits of a juridical code.
Let the words I enjoin on you today stay in your heart. You shall tell them to your children, and keep on telling them when you are sitting at home, when you're out and about, when you are lying down, and when you're standing up. You must fasten them on your hand as a sign, and on your forehead as a headband. You must write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم.
Literally, Haram al-Sharif means noble sacred enclosure. Shaped like an irregular trapezoid, it extends for almost 500 meters, surrounded by the hills of Bezetha and Ophel, and the Kidron and Tyropian valleys. Every Friday, beginning with the first hours of the day, an unceasing flow of faithful enter the enclosure and head toward the Haram, the area dedicated to prayer. For the Muslim, it's a moment of faith, but also an opportunity to meet others, negotiate and carry out small business transactions before settling down to reflection and listening. The people come from the Arab quarters of Jerusalem, but also from Jericho, Ramallah, and Gaza, as well as from the more remote towns in Judea.
The dome of the Qubat al-Sakhra Mosque conceals the peak of Mount Moriah, venerated because of its traditional association with Abraham's sacrifice. The vast open space, which once fronted the temple and which today still echoes with reminders of the majestic architectural design commissioned by Herod the Great, is bathed in sunshine. A mixture of worlds within a single, without any apparent boundaries of rites and faiths. 20 centuries earlier, as the Passover drew near, the Sanhedrin, the supreme council of the Hebrews, met as it always did in this place. But in those days, the square looked very different, ringed as it was by the many temple buildings.
To reach the vast open area that many scholars today identify as the location of the Sanhedrin, one must traverse a long, twisting subterranean tunnel. This tunnel links the Wailing Wall, one of the symbolic sites of Judaism, with the so-called Via Dolorosa, Christianity's most important prayer route. The route leads to the heart of the Jerusalem of Jesus' time, to the discovery of a city seemingly buried under 2,000 years of history.
In those days, perhaps not far distant in spirit from these sites which have always been gathering places, someone might have heard and repeated the tension-filled words of several influential people. They were scribes, who had declared that the title Rabbi, attributed to them, specifically meant my teacher, a message repeated not by chance in Aramaic, the language of Jesus.
It is to your advantage that one man should die for the people, rather than the whole nation should perish.
So said Caiaphas, who was high priest during the time John the Baptizer preached and when Jesus was put on trial. That day, along the street that led to the Sanhedrin, Caiaphas was joined by some Pharisees who had reaffirmed their position as spiritual leaders, guardians of the knowledge of the law, of which they felt themselves to be the sole interpreters. Any law, either written or orally transmitted.
Colorful and noisy, Jerusalem is a typical Middle Eastern city. Traffic is heavy, the streets teeming with the daily business of buying and selling. The heady perfume of brightly colored spices fills the air. Higher up, toward the hills, the downtown noises recede, giving way to the silence of olive groves and the light rustling of the wind in the leaves. Not the wind, but the breath of God, or so legend says.
Caiaphas follows his usual route. The people he passes are the same type he sees every day. They are people of the earth, the common people who do not understand the law, who step aside to make way for him. But the thoughts of Caiaphas are so turbulent that he moves through the crowds without even hearing the greetings or the homage paid him by the people. They don't behave according to our ancient traditions, but rather accept food with unwashed hands. There are 6 days when work is to be done. Come and be healed on one of those days, and not on the Sabbath. The words repeated to him by the chief of the synagogue, who had told him about the way in which Jesus had healed a woman on the Sabbath, pound in his head. Perhaps for the first time, the crowd in the streets of Jerusalem appeared different to him. It was the same crowd that had been overjoyed at all the wonders that man from Galilee had worked. Alas for you, Pharisees, because you like to take the seats of honor in the synagogues and to be greeted respectfully in the market squares. Alas for you, because you are like the unmarked tombs that people walk on without knowing. The words of Jesus hammered relentlessly in the mind of Caiaphas. His plan became more definite. Something had to be done immediately for the Sanhedrin and for Rome.
In Jerusalem, a new day was beginning. It seemed to be a day like any other. The temple gates had just opened, as usual.
A message, a terrible message without reply, had just been made public. But so far that morning, only a few had heard it. Amid the general consensus, Caiaphas had declared, "It is to your advantage that one man should die for the people, rather that the whole nation should perish." No one was missing from the meeting. Bystanders began to murmur. The chief priests, the elders, the scribes, all the members, everyone was there. A sign that something very serious had been decided. Meanwhile, Jesus walked along the shore of the lake and through the cornfields. He got into a boat and made a tour around the villages, and then went up onto the mountain, all the while continuing to remind his listeners, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. Words that weighed like a boulder and seemed to echo with ominous, revolutionary overtones. The city near the desert, where Jesus withdrew with his disciples, no longer has the ancient name of Ephraim or Ephraim, possibly meaning bad luck, but Attaiba, a more recent name meaning benediction. The town is a modest one, but ruins dating back to the Roman era bear witness to the fact that it was once the capital of Samaria. Jesus no longer went about openly among the Jews. Instead, he remained with his disciples. They spent the days waiting. Around them, the apparently monotonous rhythm of the days cloaked a tension that presaged the drama to come. The chief priests and Pharisees had by now issued specific orders. Anyone who knew where Jesus could be found was to inform them so that they could arrest him. The command issued by the Sanhedrin had reached Ephraim without causing much disturbance in the local community. In the town, a merchant who had just arrived spoke about the strange goings-on in Jerusalem, mysterious predictions voiced by the chief priests and Pharisees. Here is this man working all these signs, they said. If we let him go on this way, everybody will believe in him, and the Romans will come and suppress the holy place and our nation. So went the talk in the streets, where the people repeated word for word the discussion held in the Sanhedrin.
Jesus' gaze wandered to the horizon. With the approach of spring, the mountains appeared sharper in the distance. Far away, the old road wound its way toward Jericho. The days spent by the lake, the boat he had climbed aboard so as not to be crushed by the crowd, seemed distant memories.
"Follow me," Jesus had said to Levi, the son of Alphaeus, who was sitting in the tax office by the lake shore. "My child, your sins are forgiven," he had said in Capernaum, where he had healed the lame man. And finally, there were the words that had caused Caiaphas many a sleepless night. The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. The hours of the day slipped by, marked by the routine of everyday life. The presence of a man who had arrived from out of nowhere in the company of a small group of strangers passes almost unnoticed. The already oppressive heat is an invitation to seek shelter. The olive trees on the hillsides offer a little shade, above all for those who still have a long journey ahead of them. Silence reigns below among the houses of the town. A light wind blows off the desert, seeming to carry in its wake the sound of a voice. It comes from Capernaum, from Jerusalem, from remote Perea. It bounces off the pillars of power, enters the palaces of the mighty, and follows inaccessible paths according to a mysterious plan. The message of Jesus is completely new. To even desire a woman is already adultery. One must be reconciled with one's brother before bringing a gift to the altar. Love for one's neighbor is to be practiced even more ardently when those neighbors are enemies and persecutors.
When Jesus reached Jerusalem, he found a great deal of activity going on in the temple area. Dozens of laborers worked in shifts on a colossal architectural project. Jesus saw that a large crowd had joined his disciples. Pharisees, Herodians, Sadducees, scribes, and the common people were all waiting for him.
"Master, which is the greatest commandment of the law?" asked a doctor of the law, so as to put him to the test.
You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. And the second commandment resembles it. You must love your neighbor as yourself. On these 2 commandments hang the whole law and the prophets too.
No one dared to ask him any further questions, but the sentence had already been handed down. Not a religious sentence, because that carried no civil weight. The only move guaranteed to stop Jesus, that untouchable revolutionary, was a political one. To form an alliance, to bring accusations against him, and to put him on trial, and silence him once and for all.
صفلي روح من الأعيار الدجى في النوم والصحوة غفلتي هنا تزيد في الدرب حيرتي